Hello, Seawolves! And well, that was a very exciting, very interesting first racing day in the final, the America's Cup, the good old mug. And I really enjoyed it. So let's dive right in and make the analysis of this first two races, where I think we saw some very interesting first contours of what this race is really going to turn out to be about. But of course, first, I hope you're ready. I'm ready. I got some delicious fresh coffee in here. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Oh. Every time we do that, we make the world a little bit better. Having a nice toast together in these a little bit. It's getting real quite dystopian in Amsterdam, if you ask me. But that's not for this channel. So the first day in the real America's Cup, and I have to say it was beyond my expectations. I still, after the Prada Cup, with basically a 6-to-1 win ratio, not that surprising or exciting after a while. This at first looked a little bit like it was maybe going to go that same direction, but pretty quickly it became clear that I think there is a real race in all of this. And so let's just start with the first race and kind of go through it. I already talked about that in previous episodes, and for my mind, we see, and we also saw that today, that these AC75s, once the team is really in control of the boat, which both teams at this point are really veterans, if you can say that, of the AC785. They have the boat very well in control. There are a few minor differences in how well they handle certain maneuvers. I'll go into that in a little bit. But the overall boat speed are so close to each other, the maneuvering speed are so close to each other, that really the entire race, for my mind, revolves, I should say, around the start and the starting box and the tactics there. And maybe that's something that I kind of haven't heard anybody talk about. The moment right after, where I think in the second race today, New Zealand maybe left one particular thing untried, one particular strategy. So I think the most important thing to kind of start this analysis with is that throughout the Prada Cup, basically from the start of the Prada Cup, we've seen no takeovers at all, no lead changes within races at all. So every single time we saw Rossa take the lead from the start and then dominate throughout the race. Once, of course, we saw Team Ineos do that also. And so it just shows that with this very close boat speed and maneuver speed, that once one of the boats within the starts manages to kind of get in front of the other party and then uses good tactics to kind of keep their opportunities locked down and just matches them tack for tack, jibe for jibe, making sure that they just cannot go past. In that scenario, the second boat, the boat behind, just doesn't have the speed to overcome the other one. It's not like Formula One, where if you go a little bit later into the turn, if you take a little bit some risk somewhere, you can win 3-4 car lengths, which actually through the turn can put you in front of the other car. More risky, more dangerous, more tight to the margin, but possible. But in this particular race, that option just is not there. There's not that much margin still left in the turns or in the top speed, where on a downwind leg they could just outpace the other, but so much with so many boat lengths that they could just fly by without the other boat having the time to get in the way. So passing the other boat, once they have even a little bit of a significant lead, I think at this point, tactically, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but very unlikely. So really, if we look statistically at what's happening in the race so far, we can say that right now, with 100%, all of the last, I think it's in total 11 races, we've seen no passes at all. So the race was effectively won in the start box, and they may have gained a little bit distance and then fallen back a little bit, but essentially that win or lose situation right out of the start box. Whenever that was lost, whoever won that ultimately ended up winning the race. And so you can ask, like, how important was still the rest of the race? More opportunities to make a mistake. Sure, we saw a few mistakes also in the race today, but tactically that makes it very, very hard. And so that's kind of my frame going into the first race. I talked about this a little bit before, during the Vendée analysis, where I basically said, look, for my mind, the America's Cup is really going to be all about tactics. And the tactics within the starting box, super, super mega important. And I think there are one or two opportunities later in the race that might enable a team to still make a pass, but it hasn't been tried and it hasn't been done in a way that I think is like the one option how it might be possible. So I might have a new strategy here that maybe we'll see it get tried in the next few days. It'll be very interesting to see. So I wrote a few things down. One thing that really stands out is that both teams are much smoother in the maneuver. So it's mentioned, by several parties that especially bringing the foils up and down, they've slowed all this down to make the maneuvers much more steady. They're keeping the boat much more really on a rail. And you see also that in the straight lines up and downwind, that the kind of shimmying and all this type of unbalanced kind of small but probably time costly little correction errors, all of that has been really tuned down, and the boats are really very, very straightly going down the path and very, very efficient, resulting in these top speeds that are usually around 40-41 knots and just very, very close together on the long pieces. Then let's get to what it really all revolves around, and that is the starting box. And so in race one, we saw, I think maybe because of nerves, Jimmy, for my mind, kind of trying something different. So where we'd seen him be really quite aggressive with the other team, throughout the whole Product Cup, and being very effective in using that maneuvers and that aggressiveness and getting really close to the other boats to get up front. In this particular case, and maybe it's a new enemy, they're kind of figuring each other out, and in this particular case Team New Zealand got the upper hand, was able to kind of offhand the Luna Rossa a little bit, and were able to kind of grab, even though it was a very small, really one or two boat lengths lead right off the bat. And I think throughout the first race, what we really saw, it's been a lot debated, that Terahute is a little bit faster. It's not 3 knots, a lot of people were talking about, it's definitely not 3 knots faster, but throughout this race, and especially in the comparison with the second race of the day, we saw that during the first race with Terahute ahead, they were able to slowly but steadily run away from the Italians, and they just kept running away basically the entire rest of the race, and finished very, very comfortably ahead. In the second race, we saw quite the opposite, where yes, the Italians were slowly gaining a little bit because they have a better position, but they weren't gaining as fast as the New Zealanders were when they were in the same position. And we saw time and again that New Zealand was despite their tactical disadvantage, so in the maneuvers they were kind of forced to lose time, but on the straight and narrow, whenever they were able, even in a slight way, to kind of race their own race, they were again gaining. So that makes me believe that there is a slight speed edge to the New Zealanders, and I predict that in the rest of the races, whenever we see New Zealand win that starting battle, that it's going to be really impossible for the Italians to get ahead, not because of missing tactics, but really because Terahute is just a little bit smaller. It's not a massive factor, but over these 6 laps that they're doing, it's enough. It's maybe a quarter of a knot. It's something really small but significant enough that it gains them, I think, on average 300, 400 meters every race. So if I'm right about that, we'll see that whenever Terahute wins, and if the Italians are not making any big mistakes and basically giving chase in a perfect way, that we'll still see them win with a 300 to 400 meter lead, because the boat is just a little bit faster. Au contraire, if we see the Italians in front, they basically were about 100 meters ahead, but during the race they actually were 400 meters ahead in the second race. But we saw the Kiwis just kind of come back every time, when they had even a little space, that boat speed just kind of reared up. And I think we'll see the same thing. So whenever the Italians get in front, I think they'll be able to stay in front through those aggressive tactics, but we'll see the Kiwis will keep knocking on their door, let's say. They'll keep getting closer and closer, but just unable to pass because the boats just don't have the speed or the agility enough to actually make a pass unless the Italians really make some kind of bad mistake, which I just don't see happening. And yeah, so that's kind of what we'll be seeing. So we'll see maybe 50 or 100 meter leads whenever the Italians wins, but the other way around, we'll see 400, maybe sometimes 500 meters, because Terahute is actually a little bit faster. Now for the starting box tactics. Now the starting box is very unpredictable, let's say. So in these two races, at least, we saw both teams kind of try something different. In the first race, the Italians really seeking that close combat, let's say, right in front of the start with Team New Zealand, where in the second race, we saw the Kiwis really actively avoid that by, going up a little bit, trying to get a little bit more distance so that they only really get close to the Italian boat right before the start. And that might have worked, but I think the timing on their start was just a little bit off. Maybe they were in the corner of the racetrack that had just a little bit less wind, so it might have worked. And may just have been slightly bad circumstances which gave Luna Rossa just enough edge to start guarding, and then once they were in that position, it was basically impossible. But I think that especially in the starting box, that's what it's all going to be about. And seeing how well Jimmy Spithill, they call him the Pitbull for a reason, and Luna Rossa have been doing this and have been really had a chance to perfect this particular tactics in the starting box against the British team. They have a lot more experience there. So it is going to be a very tough challenge for the Kiwis to overcome that extra 10 or so races that the Italians have against a real opponent, using those tactics very effectively, and they're gonna have to find some way around it. So I'll be very interested to see what they do. For my mind, the one opportunity that I see that hasn't really been tried is to continue the close attacking or jibing battle right from the start. So basically what we see now is that we have the battle within the starting box, which can kind of go either way. It's different every time, we have wind speeds that are different, we have wind directions that are different, so there's no way to really say you have to do this because it's different every time. But the one thing that we know is Jimmy is always going to go for that very close confrontation basically as soon as possible, right? So that's something that the New Zealanders kind of can work with, either in avoiding that and trying to wrong foot them and then go past them. But I think that there are other opportunities also right after the start. And so what we saw, especially in the second race when the Kiwis fell behind, is that right after they after they lost kind of the start, and even though the Italian lead was still very small, I think the only advantage that still exists to make a pass is in the maneuvers. So the only way basically to show to slow the other A75 down is by making maneuvers, either tacking or jibing. That's the only place where, right after the start, if you're still close enough, you might force them to make a mistake. And so what I think this will evolve into after the start is that if you know the favorable side of the road, let's say, so you're pretty sure, and we see that either team will guard, right? So if New Zealand had tacked right after the start, so they were on the ley line, they saw that Italy is with them but slightly ahead, if they tacked right away, forcing them into attack, and then tack right away back and try within those maneuvers to force them to make a mistake, I think only if you're as close as the boats are going to be, that they're never as close to each other as right in the start, right there, right? That's the moment when they're the closest. right after the start, if you're behind, being so close to the other boat, that I feel is the moment when there is still a chance to pass them. Once they get the opportunity to run even, 20 or 30 meters away, statistically, looking at the previous races, it's almost as good as over. And the only wild card for my mind that hasn't really been tried in there is to keep that battle for the optimum line going until you basically win it, right? It's the last chance you have. The start is over. If you've lost the start, then keep changing sides basically. Of course, the one factor in that is it will slow you down. So if the other party doesn't go with you, then you have a problem because they're just going to make a straight line for it and get an advantage. But if you can do it in such a way that you keep forcing the other boat to go with you, if you can do it sensibly, let's say, to go to weather, and so maybe that means you have to, if you feel that you're losing the start, that you might go to the bad wind side right away, hoping that they will tack with you, even though they know it's the bad side. And then as soon as they've tacked with you to the bad side, you quickly tack to the good side. Now they're not going to let you, take the good side and stay on the bad side, even though it may save them attack. So they're going to go with you again, and that might give you at least, one extra maneuver. Well, if you think it through in the second row, they might not go with you. So there's a lot of psychology to this particular battle, and whatever you have to do, you got to do something unexpected. So we can talk about it here, and they're also always going to have to come up with something different. But for my mind, that is the one spot still, bar the mistake. But waiting for somebody else to make a mistake is not a strategy to win, right? So the one extra strategy that I hope to see evolve from this game that we're seeing right now is that both teams kind of make the same analysis that I made, is saying it all happens in the start. Once the start is lost, it's basically over unless you can use the very closeness of the boats right after the start to force a lead change. I think that's the only moment left where a lead change might still happen. But to do that, you have to maneuver, so you have to get into some continuous close battle. And you have to really start and work through that very cleverly, because it doesn't work if the other boat doesn't tack with you, so you're going to lose your advantage. So you have to do it in some way so that you also force the guarding party to tack with you every time. And if you can force them to make even the slightest mistake there, then and only then maybe the ACs have the speed in that first moment when they're not all the way up to the top speed yet, etc., to actually correct for losing the start and actually, getting into that first position and then guarding in. That's the one option that I see. So I'm very curious, what you rest of the Seawolves think about this particular idea. I'm very curious to see what strategic, tactical options you see for passing. Where do you think it lies? Like I said, for my mind, in the turns, I don't see a chance to win enough there. The one thing that for me was really telling was the mistake in the second race that the Italians made. So once they went on the downwind, the New Zealanders made a split. And in that particular moment, the Italians waited quite long to correct it. So they really allowed for the New Zealanders to kind of race their own race for a little bit. And we saw that immediately, and I mean immediately, result in 300 meters of lead loss. So they were about like 420 meters lead. And just that one maneuver of not guarding against immediately cost them 300 meters, which for me says Terahute is a little bit faster. It's not three knots. But they are a little bit faster, and the only reason why they can't get past the Italians is that the speed difference isn't enough to actually pass them. If they're like in a straight drag race, they might be able to slowly ease ahead. But like what we saw in the first race, when they were ahead, the speed difference isn't so large as like, wow, they're obviously faster. It's a small but significant difference, which over these six attacks basically results in about a 400 meter lead. So it's a quarter of a knot, something around that Terahute is faster. On the other side, I do think that the Italians are maneuvering better. So it's mentioned by several of the commentators also. I think that the maneuvers of the Italians are a little bit smoother at this point. They're a little bit faster to the turns. Whenever there are attacks involved, we see that the New Zealanders fall back a little bit, even when they were ahead. Every time they make attack, you see them lose a little bit of that new build lead, and then the speed gets them over it again. So overall, they were building their lead, but they were really losing some meters in the tax. And so for my mind, looking at this first racing day, that's the insights that kind of came to me. That's the things that I was seeing. But overall, 1-1 result. So it can go either way, which I'm very, very happy to see that. I honestly would have been a little bit disappointed if the New Zealanders would have just run away with it in the same way that the Italians ran away with the Prada Cup with a 2-2-0 start. That would have not been so interesting. This, I think, makes it more engaging, so that's very good news. But in the race itself, I really hope that they're going to, go to bed today and work long nights in the coming days to figure out some kind of tactics to break open that passing situation. And like I said, I think it all lies in the start of the race. The start is one thing, but if you want that, I believe there is still a chance to overtake once, but it probably has to happen within the first minute, maybe minute and a half. If you don't do it within the first minute or minute and a half of the race after the start, I think all the statistics show that it's impossible unless the other team makes some catastrophic mistake, which I don't see happening. So that's my analysis of the day. I'm really curious to see what you guys saw. I'm really curious to see your ideas about strategies, so leave them in the comments below. And yeah, short, but I hope you enjoyed this analysis for today. And of course, every race day I'll do an analysis like this, so I hope you will join me for all of them. And on Friday, like promised, we'll have the first true report where we're going to talk about many of the other races going on, and also I'm going to take you onto my boat and the refit project, because in the comments last time many of you asked for an update, so we're going to do a little bit of DIY Seawolf in the latter part of the Friday show, where I'm going to show you all the different projects going on and the status of things and the incredible amount of sanding, already 12 days of sanding that I've been doing on Spirit. So that's it for today. I hope you have a great day or evening, depending on where and when you were watching this. Thank you all again very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe. Please like the video, very important for the YouTube gods. And I'll see you all after the next race. Ciao and have a great day.